Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. It's exactly 1 month and 9 days to the next financial year. We're talking about 2024-2025. But what does it look like for all of us? 72 trillion is what we're talking about right now. The budget framework paper started at 52 trillion, jumped its way to estimates of 58 trillion, now seems to have settled at 72 trillion. The biggest question is, who are the movers and shakers, or who will be taking the biggest lion's share from this national cake? Is government not telling us about where oil will be coming in, or grants that we don't know about? Or does IFRIS have a new spectrum that we don't know about? Finally, we want to look at how the import substitution will be able to cushion this economy, especially looking at how tight it will be come 72 trillion and 31 trillion to be collected. Let me give you the estimates of what it looks like. So in 2020-2021, that financial year, what about 45 trillion shillings? That was the financial year there. 2021-2022, we got to 45.658 trillion shillings. We increased from 45 by about 3 trillion shillings to the next financial year, which was 2022-2023, which was 48.1 trillion shillings, a jump by about 5.4%. We went up to the financial year we're in right now, which is at about 52.7 trillion shillings, a jump of about 9.6 trillion shillings, that is 2023-2024. And finally, where we'll become 1st July 2024, will be at 72.1 trillion shillings, which is a jump of 36%. But let's show you what URA will be collecting, which is our next slide here. Our next slide of URA, which is showing exactly what will be happening with URA. Before I get to URA, let me give you exactly what it looks like our imports. Our biggest imports there, if you look at the green, you will look at foods and beverages, minerals, which are 22%, petroleum products at 17%, chemicals. So generally, we have a lot that we're importing into the country, and it takes the lion's share, taking the dollars out of the country. But let's look at what URA collects for us. If we can go to the next slide there to see exactly what URA is doing for us. URA right now is at a whooping... it's estimated to be collecting about 31 trillion this financial year, but also last financial year, what about 29 trillion shillings. The year before that, what about another 29 trillion shillings. So we have been jumping in between that. But the biggest question is that in the last financial year, URA collected 23 trillion shillings short of the 29 trillion shillings. But when you look at also this financial year, as we speak right now, they're at 20 trillion shillings, and the target is 29 trillion shillings. The biggest question is, can they hit their target? With 31 trillion and a balance of 41 trillion, where is this money going to come from? That's the biggest question. Let's get to the panel. On my extreme right, my closest neighbor there, Professor Sarah Sally, who is a dean at the School of Women and Gender Studies at Makerere University. She's with us today, all in green, not simplifying anything else, but good evening, Professor.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, our viewers.
It's good to have you.
Thank you.
John Walugembe, the Executive Director for the Federation of Small and Medium Enterprises. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening to our viewers.
Gentlemen, we call on when we want to understand exactly where government is taking our money. Julius Mukunda, the Executive Director of CS Bag. Good evening, sir. The gentleman that has been in and out of Parliament, making his maiden appearance on our show, in and out of Parliament, defending and presenting the budget. State Minister for Finance, Honorable Henry Musasizi, who also is in charge of general duties. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you, and good evening all the people out there. I want to correct your statement. This is not my maiden appearance. I have appeared here several times before.
So I have hosted you before?
No. Charles was always.
Yes. So the maiden for me to host you, sir. Very true. So it is a draw and the budget is good to go. It's good to have the minister here. You can be part of the show. You can text us or WhatsApp us on 0709 62 25 92. That's our text or WhatsApp number there. Or go to our X platform, hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines. Let us know what you think about this budget and how it will affect you in one way or another. But before we jump into the budget, this week, sad news coming through, especially from Iran. His Excellency, the President Ibrahim Rais, passing on there in a helicopter accident. Very sad news coming through. And also the president today making a statement and for the last few days talking about it. But also we're cognizant of the crime rate that is beginning to pick up and a statement made by the Honorable Minister Babalanda about the crime and the guns coming in through.
Question. Is the question why have we moved from 52 to 72?
The rationale of coming from 52 to 58 to 72 trillion, every Ugandan out there, really, the last discussion we had here, especially with Professor and hopefully with John, we discussed the estimate of 58. Now we're at 72. What we're trying to understand is how did we come from 52 to 58 to 72? Help us make sense of it.
I think what you need to appreciate is that the budget process takes us exactly 9 months to passing the budget. And the critical stage is starting January when we present we present in December and defend the BFP in January. So at every stage, some things happen. At the BFP stage, we presented the budget with the preliminary, we always call it preliminary resource envelope. At estimate stage, we presented the resource envelope, but with a view that should some things happen, we have a room to do a corrigenda. And the corrigenda normally comes as a tail end. So what constitutes the 52, the 58, the 60, whatever you are talking about in those numbers are just working figures. The final number is the 72, which we came up with. The rest were just facilitating the process. So why the movement? What we are doing is largely full disclosure. We have been having an obligation with the central bank, which we have not been paying, which have been accruing. But now this year we have decided that we must have a clean sheet with the Bank of Uganda. And in the movement from 52 to 72, included in there is an obligation to BOU amounting to 7.8 trillion, which we are going to pay back to the bank so that we have a clean sheet in the period we shall be in. And also there are a number of things which we cannot do away with. There are investments we must make. One of them is, in this year, next year, we are going to start preparations for elections. There is a big amount there for elections. Those who are in livestock, the markets are closed. We must spend money. We must pay for the vaccines. They call them foot and mouth disease. That one is taking a big chunk of that. We must change our IDs. Miller is another area which is taking money. We must continue investing in oil and gas and generally the minerals. It's taking money. We are beginning preparations for AFCON 2027. We must construct Akibwa Stadium. We must construct Hoima Stadium. And we must pay other commitments to CAF, the $30 million, which is amounting to about 117 million. We must continue to invest in science and technology, the vaccines, the pathogenic economy, and many others of that nature. So that combined has brought an additional financing requirement of about 3.2 trillion. On top of the debt we have with Bank of Uganda, which we are to pay, and other obligations. Another important aspect to note for the public is that we undertook the fiscal consolidation, deliberate fiscal consolidation program. Increase debt, increase revenue, rationalize expenditure or minimize expenditure, and bring the debt down. So this year's discretionary expenditure is minimal. We have rationalized or repurposed our budget to the extent of 2.7 trillion. What some of the entities have been getting is declining significantly, and the total comes to 2.7 trillion. What does all this now mean to our general economic management? It means that today you are seeing 72, and it appears to be outside the normal for the public. But for us, we are optimistic, because we are going to deal with a big portion of debt, and most of these things we are investing in, which I have mentioned, are a one-off, but they have a great role they play in our growth. So once all these investments have been made, at the end of the day, we shall be able to have an economy which is able to give you revenues far above the 31 trillion we are talking about. And at the end of the day, we shall achieve our overall goal of having a sustainable economy, self-financed economy, and the resilient economy we would wish to see.
Honorable Minister, just a follow-up question. You said the investment, you talked about elections, oil, NIRA, AFCON, science and technology, 7.8 trillion to Bank of Uganda. Yes, you've talked about
Many things.
all those things there. And
Parish model, Emioga, UDP.
Honorable Minister, I'll take some of those. But let me ask, if you are this year, if the report I have seen is to anything to go by, 20 trillion shillings is what they've been able to raise. They have 20 trillion, according to the minority report presented by Honorable Semuju.
No, I don't. I am in the government. You don't refer to minority reports when you are talking to me.
If URA has fallen short to raise money,
the year has not yet closed. The year will close on 30th of June. Let's assess URA after.
Okay, let's assess it
30th
last
of
year,
June.
23 trillion.
Yes, last year,
How is
URA
government
closed
planning to raise the
with
money?
URA closed with an excess of 40 billion shillings. Yes.
How do you plan to raise 72 trillion shillings?
No, I think that's like
How do we plan?
Yes,
I am sure you have done an analysis there.
yes.
In the 72 trillion, there is URA 31 trillion. There is NTR of a certain amount. There is programmed borrowing of a certain amount. All these things are there. So part of the money will be tax revenue. Part of the money will be non-tax revenue we collect from fees, licenses, local governments, all those things. And part of the money will be external financing, and part of the money will be borrowed domestically. So that's how we shall raise the 72 trillion.
Sir, when you say 31 trillion is URA, most of the rest is borrowing, as we put it there. And we also look at a report from IMF telling us we have reached a certain stage, a threshold that is threatening for them. Then a Moody report that comes out that moves Uganda from B2 to B3. Isn't our debt concern for you?
No, what you should be concerned about is what are we borrowing for? That should be the concern. Forget about the 50% seed. That one is there as a warning. When you get there, you begin, it's like a borderline. It just warns you, when you cross, you know you are going into a red zone, a dangerous zone. So it keeps you on check. But there is no harm of crossing as long as you are crossing for good reasons. So the question should be, what are we borrowing for? Are we borrowing to build a strong economy? If the answer is yes, then that is where all our focus should be. But not IMF, this, that. Yes, we know those ones, but the key question for Uganda now is to build a self-sustaining economy. And to achieve that, you must invest in key sectors which really can spur this economy. And this is what we are doing. Have you heard of the ATMs we have come up with? Agro-based industrialization, the tourism, development, minerals and oil and gas, then the knowledge economy. Those are the key sectors which are our center of focus. And in our 10-year development strategy, we have decided to, our goal is to grow our economy 10 times. If we are at $50 billion in GDP, we want by 2040, 2029-40, to have grown this GDP to $500 billion.
Okay.
Yes. And to achieve that, the areas of focus is agro-industrialization, minerals and oil and gas, tourism sector development, and also the knowledge economy, what we call the science and innovations.
Thank you. Julius, let me come to you. We can't know where we're going until we know where we're coming from or where we are. Give us a performance, especially up to date, of this budget and what indicators inform the 2024-2025 budget in your view.
I mean, we have a 52 trillion budget, which will end at the 30th of June this particular financial year. The Honourable Minister has said there hasn't ended, so probably some of the figures might be revised. Because when you say URA has a shortfall around 800 billion as at the end of December 2023, we are hoping that the remaining 6 months they should be able to recover and come back. But in terms of expenditure, we are, by December 2023, we had performed actually even by more than 100%. So in terms of the way we are spending, I think we are not doing badly. But in terms of the way we are collecting revenue, it's an area that we need to put more focus on. So for the next remaining months and a few days, we are hoping that URA should have recovered to be able to collect their targets. But Timothy, you know, you asked the minister, and I think there are some certain things we need to get more clarity on. and for me is the question of, you asked the question of debt, whether we are worried or not, and he said we shouldn't be worried. And I think even before we came here, I was with him, I was telling him, for me, I'm worried now. And for good reasons, really, because if we have a 72 trillion budget and half of that is for debt servicing, then there must be a problem. If only 20% of that was debt servicing, you could say, okay, fine, we are going to recover. But if half of that is debt servicing, to the extent that even the 58 trillion that we had, the minister had to go, the government had to go in a long way to make sure that we do fiscal consolidation. And the purpose for fiscal consolidation actually was to make sure that we don't borrow, because if you want to spend more money, you definitely have to go and borrow. So half, to find that 72, then almost half of that is going for debt servicing. It worries me. The other important element I think we also need to understand is, and I've expressed this, is that if we are borrowing cheaply, and for me cheaply is concessional borrowing. If there was enough concessional borrowing, and we don't look here at our banks on Kampala Road, there could be some comfort in that. But if you look at the agenda that the minister, that the government presented to Parliament, and the minister, and I think I give credit to the Minister of Finance, because really in terms of being transparent, Honorable, you are very transparent. Because we have these numbers, wherever you want to get, you can actually get them. And the minister was very candid. He said, by the way, even when I'm increasing this budget to 72, it is going to force us to borrow 12 trillion domestically. So remember, this financial year we haven't finished. Our domestic borrowing has been capped at 3.5. It's going to go to 12 trillion. That worries me simply because I know that the few surviving businesses in this country were on borrowing money from these banks. But now if government has come with this big appetite to borrow 12 trillion, I'm telling you, banks are just going to keep quiet. Timothy, you won't get it. The other loan that the bank had promised you, you won't get it. If they're going to give it to you, they will double the interest rate. So those are the things that worry me. And I really need comfort from the minister on what we're going to do to deal with those particular elements. And he also talked about something which is very important, that these percentages, we might forget about them. And I think even on this show, I had talked about it. I said for me, the 50% GDP, debt to GDP is not is my issue, even if we come to 100. But what are we borrowing for? And for me, that's my concern. What we are borrowing for and how we are utilizing the loans. So out of this money is really, especially the agenda of 13 trillion, where I find that you are going to borrow 12 trillion. And partly over these expenditures, you want to pay cultural leaders salaries. I would say, I would begin to question myself, is that the right thing to borrow for? And the list can go on for many other things. But also I think one of the challenges we face as a country is our ability to execute these loans on time, but also on budget. Because the biggest challenge we face is that these agencies put pressure, especially on the Honorable, because the one who goes to Parliament to ask for these signatures. We want these loans. But the moment they give them loans, they can't move ahead, simply because they were not prepared at all. We have 14.4 trillion of undisbursed loans. And we spend on an annual basis around 400 billion on the commitment fees. That's a fine you pay for having not utilized that particular loan. So before we even go for these new loans, Timothy, I would have loved to see how we intend to put pressure on accounting officers to bring that 14 trillion and bring it into the economy. So that we can forget about the 12 trillion we want to borrow from the domestic market. And that can inform how this budget is going to be rolled out. Because at this particular moment, Honorable Minister, I think we are going to have a very big challenge of executing this particular budget. Because I don't think we are prepared to execute it because of our capacity really to deliver on some of these projects that we're talking about. And the heavy projects that we're talking about. You're talking about SGR. You're talking about building a Kabua Stadium. And of course I have problems with that because a Kabua Stadium, for the last 10 years we've been talking about it, giving it money and it's not getting out of the ground. And I don't know the miracle we are going to put in place to ensure that now that we have ACFON, that these kind of projects are going to come out. Simply because, Timothy, is that one, we are not prepared to do it, to execute these projects. And number two is that capacity to do them. These complicated projects is not like building a community road or a community bridge. It's complicated. It needs planning. And the Auditor General is telling us that almost 35% of our projects don't have visibility studies. And that's my big, so Timothy, that is my problem. And once we don't deal with that, then we now get worried of how we are going to execute a 72 trillion budget.
Following you, especially having seen some of the things you put on X and some of the concerns you have raised, I think mine is, my first question that every Ugandan who is in business or is hoping to get in business is how confident are you as small and medium enterprises in this 72 trillion vis-a-vis what Julius has spoken about, the borrowing and also the 14.4 trillion that is still there?
Okay, first of all, I would say that the current budgeting process, as Julius has mentioned, is extremely transparent. And the Ministry of Finance as a whole, if you go to their website, a lot of this information is there. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's a good thing in the sense that they are not opaque. So it means that you can engage them. But it's also difficult for them sometimes because once you bring the figures, then you can't even kind of contradict them. I would say that for me, my concern about the budget is simply the way in which this extra money came in. You know, the budgeting process is clear, as he mentioned. You start in somewhere in September, and you move along and so on. Now, you bring this corrigendum at the tail end when parliamentarians, mind you, they are in this session from 10 a.m. to about midnight. So they don't really have time to scrutinize because what we want them to do, their role as parliamentarians is appropriation. You know, we want them to scrutinize and say, is this important, is this not important, and so on and so forth. And I gave an example of the Secretary Generals of cooperative unions to organize the AGM, and then they bring the audited accounts at 1 p.m. when they are serving lunch. See? So before they would discuss other matters, but then when it came to the financials, they would bring them at 1 p.m. when people are hungry and they're lining up. So they wouldn't really have time to... they wouldn't have time to, so for me, my concern is the process. The issues that the priorities that the minister mentions, we are not opposed. The questions you're asking really are very much about how are we going to finance them. This is the issue. Because for the private sector, we know that at the end of the day, the buck will stop with us. And now, we are expected to contribute about 32 trillion. And then even borrowing, you may say, okay, the private sector is not paying the price for borrowing, but we pay because we are being crowded out. If government is borrowing domestically, if it's rolling over debt, if it's switching bonds and so on, all these things affect the cost of capital for the private sector. So for us, at a time when businesses have been complaining about IFRIS and the perception that our tax regime is extremely burdensome for businesses, we felt that raising the budget by this much is being extremely ambitious. And the minister said it correctly, said they are optimistic because the budget, real as it is just a wish list, in my view. Because sometimes you see that what is actually implemented and what's in the budget sometimes differs. Now, the other issue is that, therefore, is about the overall issue of the public debt stock. The Auditor General put it at 96.1 trillion by the end of December last year. 44.6 domestic debt, 52.8 foreign debt. Now, if government is going to borrow more, it means we are going to be in 100 trillion and so on. We have to be worried. We have to be worried as Ugandans. Not so much because the IMF says that debt to GDP ratio shouldn't exceed 50%, but the fact that we are going to find it hard to access sovereign debt. And if we can't access sovereign debt, it means we are going to have to pay even higher interest rates. And what you've mentioned about our downgrading by Moody's, I mean, it's like you go to a bank and the mainstream commercial banks reject you, and then you go to money lenders and so on. So the quality of people from whom we borrow and the interest rates that they demand likely to go up. So I think this is something that should be of concern to us. Government itself in the Public Finance Management Act committed itself to maintain prudent and sustainable levels of public debt. And we are saying that whereas it may appear to be sustainable, we are crossing the line, and we are worried, and something ought to be done to ensure that this does not occur. And of course, as part of fiscal consolidation, government has been talking about cutting expenditure, rationalizing government agencies and so on. But we are not seeing the movement, that we wanted to see. And the savings, because someone was saying, out of all these entities, we're only going to save 1 trillion. And then what you've seen is now Parliament rejecting certain bills and so on. So there has been a bit of ping pong, certain level of unseriousness, that we are not getting the benefits that we would have wanted to get from this. And I also want to go back to the issue of how are we actually spending the money. And I would agree with Julius that if you are bringing a supplementary budget, if you are bringing a corrigenda to the budget, they have to be extremely important things, because the Public Finance Management Act that provided for what they call a contingencies fund, which would be 0.5%. Instead of bring these supplementary budgets, for me, I would just go and amend and increase the contingencies fund so that it can cater for some of these emergencies. But now there are certain things that shouldn't really come, like he talked about cultural leaders, like someone wants to establish a pharmaceutical industry as an investor. Look, all of us, government just needs to put together money in an entity called a business ideas agency. Anyone with a good business idea should go and compete fair and square. It means that if someone wants to set up a big pharmaceutical industry and needs a 700 billion, they write their business plan and experts analyze it. If John has a small business and feels that it's worthy of financing, I should also go and submit it there. So for me, the point being that some of the priorities that are being brought as urgency shouldn't be. Of course, there are things that are critical, like elections, like IDs, oil and gas, AFCON. Those we agree with, but we are saying, if we think these are priorities, what else can we reduce? We can't maintain the 58.3 and then just add. No, we can say prioritization. If we think AFCON is critical, elections are critical, then we have to cut in another area so that we stay within range. The increase of 36% for me is... I've already mentioned the aspects of agencies, duplicating agencies. Because we cannot say we are rationalizing government agencies and we are only saving 1 trillion shillings. For me, I think that, for me, as a starting point, is a non-starter. And also the general cost of public administration, I think it's too high. We can bring it down, and people have been mentioning. We can go back and do the analysis. Julius has very many economists in his office who can advise. But my view is we need to avoid, because now if a cultural leader is being paid 60 million, now even me, I'll go back and create my own chiefdom. Why should I struggle in Kampala when I can go back as a prince? Because I'm a prince, I can go back and say, now I have a chiefdom and I'm entitled to 60 million. So what you're going to see now, my village, so now what you're going to see is a lot of these people rushing into this just for the money and so on and so forth. So for me, therefore, I think that where we are spending is extremely important, and I think some areas that have been included in this core agenda are not as important.
And we're going to come back to some of those areas. I wanted us to look at the whole picture before we get into import substitution. Yeah. John, sticking with you, especially on the new taxes that will come on fuel, petrol and diesel there, the impact and implication to businesses, because most of the people, if you're traveling this country, you'll find they're buying things from Kampala, transporting them up. That means there'll be an increment in that, both in public transport, and that impact and implication on that. What happens to SMEs?
Definitely there'll be, the cost of doing business will increase. But for me, my point was that government needs money, and as businesses, we must agree that something must be taxed. So for me, the increasing petrol or diesel by 100 shillings, it's uncomfortable, but it is acceptable, and I'm happy that the Parliament said the other 300 on the paraffin, that one, because some of our people don't have access to electricity. So I think that was a good judgment there. And this move to focus on indirect taxes is okay, because first of all, it's easy on the part of government, but also for businesses. You incorporate it within planning. And what we are saying as businesses, we want a predictable tax regime. That's all. So that as I plan, let me plan over the next 3 to 4 to 5 years, knowing that these are the taxes. So give us an indication so that you don't shock us along the way. See? So for me, therefore, that measure, those measures around the fuel and so on, those were okay. I'm happy that Parliament kicked out the other 5% proposal on land. I thought it was completely counterproductive, because if I'm government and I'm saying I want to grow my revenue from rental tax, allow people to build, first of all. Don't put any roadblocks. Make it easier for them to build, then you catch them at rental tax. But don't catch them on the materials, on the land, on the what. So for me, I thought the Parliament's decision was the right one. On the fuel, as I've said, it will be uncomfortable for us, but it is acceptable.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Professor, let me come to you. You've had Julius give us the numbers, especially on debt. John give us what it looks like, especially in terms of some of the taxes there. You, as a professor, when you hear this 72 trillion budget, and you think of an ordinary Ugandan there, what does it mean to them?
Thank you very much, Timothy. I think we fairly discussed that some time back, and we mainly talked about what are the cost drivers of the budget. And of course, we have a budget which is trying to prioritize industrialization. It's trying, of course, there are many things that the minister talked about which will happen next year's events, elections, and the rest. But beyond that, you have a budget which is talking about agro-industrialization, it's talking about service delivery, it's talking about so many things. And these things have to be paid for. And the money has to come from somewhere, because our economy is also small. So on ground, what does the 72 trillion mean? As you've heard, some of it is going to have to come from tax revenue. So it means people have to pay taxes. And it also means that they will not just go for the direct taxes, but they will also go for the indirect taxes. So like what you saw even with the recent strike, is the whole belief, because the URA is going for more taxes than people normally pay, and they have digitized, there's this feeling that actually they are coming for more, but maybe they're not coming for more, but they are coming for what they were already coming for, but in a more efficient manner. In that in the past, we were doing more of self-declaration, but now things have to be a little bit more accurate. So that is one way. But another way, if you look at services, it is to say we are not, you cannot shut down certain services because you don't have money. You cannot shut down health, you cannot shut down education, you cannot shut down many things. So the 72 trillion, some of it has to go into those services. And we have discussed here before that most of the taxation and the revenue that runs this country comes from Kampala, Wakiso areas. So many of the other upcountry areas are not generating as much. But then you cannot deny them a service because they did not generate as much. And that's the whole aspect of a consolidated fund at national level, that revenue is collected or more revenue is borrowed into that. But then at the end of the day, how does everyone get what they're there? So when you look at the pillars within PDM, you look at the National Development Plan, and you look at the National Development Plan, you end up knowing where a lot of that is going to go. But most importantly, government is also trying to invest for the future, which you say we shall come to in terms of import substitution. But when you talk about oil, there's a lot of investment in oil. And because the oil sector is perceived to be one of the low-hanging fruits, where results will be realizable in the next 3 to 5 years, if everything goes according to plan. So there's heavy investment into that. There's heavy investment into, like you talked about the pathogen economy after COVID. We explored that actually there are many things we could do for ourselves without necessarily bringing. There's a lot of investment in machinery, things like Kira EV. So the 72 trillion looks like that. So it's very easy to say, actually, it is debt. A lot of it is debt, and it is a problem, and we deserve to be worried, like you're saying. But you see, we're in a catch-22 situation, whereby you have a population which has reached a certain level of demanding certain things. So the population demands, and we are networked. So, like in the past, internet was not a right. Today, internet is almost a human right. If it is slow, Ugandans will complain. because even the poorest person in the village needs to know the price of things in Kampala so as to be able to sell his or her bunch of matoke to whoever has gone in the village. Same with animals and whatever. So internet and data is not just a thing which is a luxury. It is a crucial commodity, like you'd have capital. Capital and technology is very important for development. And some of this 72 trillion is going into that. Of course, as we have always said, where things are not essential and they are perceived not to be essential, but you see, if you're not in the process that is determining it, it becomes difficult to determine what is essential and what's not essential. And maybe that's why we are lucky and privileged to have the minister here, probably who will tell whether the payment of traditional leaders, Mr. Walugembe, is essential or not essential. But so it becomes difficult to critique when you're not part of the process. But what I'm saying is, sometimes it's easier to say, actually, this looks like wasteful expenditure. But what exactly is the wasteful expenditure into that? I think that is what the budget looks like. So to the common man and the common woman, it means the 72 trillion means increased pump prices, increased cost of living, increased cost of services and consumables, increased many things, okay? But if government's plan of investment and industrialization and import substitution occurs within 5 to 10 years, then those prices will come down. You see, like we import phones, for example. And of course, when you import phones, they attract taxes as you bring them in. So the 72 trillion might mean more taxation on such goods and commodities. But then if that is going into investing in a factory to make phones locally, then in the future they will be cheaper. So it just depends on how much pain we are ready to bear for the future. But again, it goes to, I know people have said it is transparent, the Ministry of Finance processes are transparent, and anyone can get the information they need. But I think also the transparency has to go on to some of these expenditure lines. And maybe it is transparent, that's why we're having this discussion. But you see, sometimes it is not just, there are certain things which are not really said. Like, you know, sometimes security budgets are classified. So you're not going to break down the nitty-gritty. So what looks like is wasteful expenditure may actually not look like wasteful expenditure. But since we have the minister who is part of this process, we will clarify some of those things.
Professor, just staying with you. An ordinary Ugandan is looking at service delivery,
Yes.
education, health, livelihood, that I can be able to put 2-3 meals on the table there, an economy that enables me. But also when we look at it, things that have been budgeted for infrastructure, biggest one in there is also Kampala, improving the roads, different areas to be able to deal with oil, to deal with gas. But these are long-term projects. Are there short-term and medium-term that can cushion this economy, especially so that a Ugandan does not feel the brunt of the taxes or of the domestic borrowing?
Timothy, that is very interesting and maybe difficult, but I think there are things.
Low-hanging fruit, Professor.
Low-hanging fruit, I talked about oil as a low-hanging fruit. The local production through PDM is a low-hanging fruit. The only problem we have is this dishing out of 1 million per household may not be a very good way of doing it. But if this were, because the money is already there for the parish, if it was put in services which are directly at the parish, in terms of extension services, in terms of storage, in terms of low-cost value addition, kind of value chains or mechanization, that is actually a low-hanging fruit. So government, I think, has run PDM that it has run, I think, for 2 years now. I imagine there will be a process of evaluation. And since it is committed, I imagine and pray that there will be a shift from the household income direct to a common pool that people can work with. And I've said the oil, and you know the oil has a lot of other added advantages. So if what is being planned for oil can actually be realized within the 3 to 5 years we have been told, that will be a good thing. The other thing which we cannot underestimate, Timothy, is the issue of services. I know it's very easy to look at services as roads with potholes, and we don't want roads with potholes. But the services in terms of putting a health center to or health center for in a community is a very expensive venture. You're paying for the workers, you're paying for the medicines, you're literally paying for the services, and sometimes in a community which is not producing much economically. Like I said, most of our taxes are from Kampala and Wakiso. But government's not going to deny people in Amolata, or people in Yombe, or people in Bulambuli, or people in Kapchorwa a health facility because they are not generating as much as Kampala and whatever. So that's what governments do at a rationalization level. So the services can be better, okay? But when we look, we need to make sense of what is the cost of the services being delivered now. But of course, they can be better in that the sectors which cushioned this country and were liberalized should be addressed. Something like extension. If you provided extension, productivity, agricultural production would improve, okay? But that was left to those who can get themselves organized, those who can get themselves into farmer groups. And then it is also a sector with a lot of externalities. Just because you have looked after your garden very well, an example of bananas, just because your bananas are well looked after with an extension worker, will not stop the banana wilt disease coming from the neighboring crop to your crop. So there are things like that which have to be fixed. And I imagine if we fixed the agriculture sector with good extension, with good inputs, with good fertilizers, with good farmer information on when it's the right time to grow things and not to grow things. Because right now you travel somewhere, you see someone is doing something very well, you all go and do it, regardless of whether the soils will support it, regardless of whether the environment will support it. So if that can be done, and at least you know there's food, at least you know there's an excess for the market, at least you know, then of course that will create a demand for some agro-processing as envisaged in the NDP and the PDM. And when then that happens, you know you're creating a market for things, and things are not getting perishables. They're not perishing just like that. Then at least you know that you have catered for food. Because when you go to the rural areas, what's the outcry now? Food. They have the farm, land, they're seated on the farm, they're not doing much, they're there, but they're hungry. And they tell you we are starving. In the past, when you went to villages, you came back with food. Now what is happening is people in villages are calling people in town to send them money for food. So if that cushioning, that's a very low-hanging fruit, if that cushioning can be done, and you know that the multitude of Ugandans have food to eat, then we come to, as the pillars are in NDP and PDM, at least things like agro-industrialization, job creation, the, what are they called? The industrial parks. I know they are sometimes they've been critiqued for simply assembling last mile things, but at least you get like 4,000 people employed. So that is some income in people's pockets, and that pushes the purchasing power up, and it increases the taxation because the ones who are producing will know that their things will be what? Will be consumed. So that then drives an economy. But in the meantime, of course, it's going to be hard, but that should not stop investment in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Honorable Minister, let me come to you. Some of the things that I know you have had, especially what John has talked about, predictive tax for any SME to be able to plan, but also some areas that we're investing in are long-term. Are there any short-term, medium-term that can cushion this economy, especially for an ordinary Ugandan not to really dig deeper into their pockets? Is that possible?
I think the professor answered that question. The immediate interventions that can stimulate and help our people, because the challenge we have is how do we bring every Ugandan into a money economy? That is bottom line. How do we ensure that every Ugandan wakes up with a program of going to do something, the jobs, especially for the young people? So the interventions is PDM. PDM has been able to take money to nearly every village in this country, what they call last mile. It is the last mile program. Emyoga, when you get to all these are trading centers where electricity has been able to reach. People are welding, people are in their saloons. All the border borders are now organized around associations. Every evening, they are putting money together into their association. 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, depending. So these are some of the things we need to look at in the short term. Can we bring every Ugandan into something that brings this person income? And the budgets, we have been consistent and deliberate. We have done a Myoga for more than 5 years now. We have done PDM we are going into the 3rd year now of parish development, the 100 million rollout. The previous one was minimal. We don't normally talk about it. But the 100 million has so far gone twice. We are now going to send the 3rd round in the next financial year. We have done the women fund under WEP. We have been able to, WEP, Youth Livelihood Program, Microfinance Support Center has been giving money to support people. UDB has been giving money for value addition in a number of areas, agro-processing, manufacturing. We have another fund, the Agricultural Credit Facility Fund under Bank of Uganda, which has supported a number of big farmers. So those are the things which can bring immediate outcomes. But of course, we cannot forget that in order for all this to thrive, our people must be healthy. Our people must send their children to school. Our people must have access to safe water, and etc., etc. So that's why you have seen our deliberate interventions in the human capital development. Can we have a health center 3 in every sub-county in Uganda? Can we have nearest ambulance services in a distance of less than 30 kilometers? Can we have a doctor at every health center 4? That is in our constituency structures. A health center 4 is in the constituency. Every constituency, like the constituency of Rwanda East where I come from, we have a health center 4. One health center 4, and another one in the next constituency. Can we have a primary school per parish? Can we have a secondary school per sub-county? Can we have at least a water source in every village? Can we have all our urban centers accessing piped water and electricity? So this is what our budget is directed to. Wealth, quick interventions which create wealth for the short and also the long term, which we had spoken about earlier, and also ensure that Ugandans, the well-being of our people must also be factored in. Now, I now come to what do we expect Ugandans to do? Definitely all these public investments must be financed. We cannot do all these things without raising revenue. He said the challenge our private sector has is that the tax regime is not predictable. I wish to inform the public, all the people out there, that we have a domestic revenue mobilization strategy which spells over a 5-year period. Whatever we are doing is consistent with that strategy. We implement this strategy through a number of mechanisms, efficiency mechanisms in revenue administration, and at times we change laws. Some laws we bring in Parliament are not seeking to introduce new taxes. They are seeking to allow URA achieve better efficiency. And sometimes the rates change. Like this IFRIS we have been talking about, there is an impression, there has been an impression out there that is a new tax. It's not. And I'm happy John is called John, yes. John is able to appreciate, and also the Professor Sally, that this is not a tax. Maybe it is shifting people from the status quo. Comfort zone, we are shifting people from a situation where they have not been paying, and now we are bringing everyone into the bracket. What I'd like John to also talk about passionately is the need to bring every Ugandan into the tax bracket by reducing informalities. We have had complaints over and over again, even before I joined the executive, when I was chairing a parliamentary committee on finance, which was responsible for playing oversight on the revenue side of the budget. The complaint was those who comply, those who try to comply are overburdened. If I comply, URA will keep coming to me. Instead of now widening, can we bring people into the bracket? Can we have as many people as possible complying with our taxes? So the challenge of informalities must be dealt with. Everyone must have a TIN number. You must have linked to all your data under NIRA. We must be able to trace you for rental, able to trace you for, if you pay a water bill, this water bill should be linked to all our systems. If you are operating a company, URSB must know this company. And in doing that, we shall even minimize the rates because we shall have so many people to tax, we shall get the desired revenue, and we shall not disturb the taxpayers. The kings and the queens. By the way, I belong to a community which don't believe in the kingdoms. In Chigezi, for us, the Wachiga, everyone is a king in his or her own home.
So should we pay you?
But also, we need to appreciate that these kingdoms are partners in development. The nature of our communities, the nature of our societies still need to be guided around the cultures, around beliefs, around traditions. So if we say we must bring every Ugandan into a money economy, if I go to, say, Acholi, I may not be believed if I go as me. But if I pass through the paramount chief, that's how they call them, if I can be corrected, the paramount chief can easily mobilize all the Acholi community around development. And
It's like taking the Kabaka of Uganda, we're going to give you a salary to mobilize the Uganda.
no, we must, if you are a partner in development, tell me a partner in development. These ones you are always with every day. Development partners, what? Tell me any partner you are dealing with who is not paid. Is there any?
The priest.
Why should you pay other partners?
The priests.
These people are also human beings.
But it's
no,
not
you
you
have
paying the partners.
development partners, all these people, huge salaries.
But
a
Honorable
king
Minister, it is not the government of Uganda that pays those partners.
No, their governments
Pay
pay
them.
them.
Yes.
Even us, these kings are
They
going
are
to
rich.
be paid us because we are their government. And the president will be meeting them soon to discuss with them the development agenda. And I can tell you, there will be more value compared to the 30 billion. The benefit we shall get as a result of involving these kingdoms as partners in development will be immense.
Let me get some feedback here. Hello, Timothy. This is Bwango Robert from Fort Portal. This time we shall conquer because the State Minister of Finance, Musasi, of the budget 2024 came in, and we have big challenges. AFCON, huge debt, burden, NERA updates, general elections, oil refinery, damaged bridges countrywide under the Ministry of Disaster and Preparedness, PDM, Ministry of Defense. But again, all these things he's talking about, youth are unemployed, and we can't reduce that. Credit of the country, we can't do something about that. It's a question to you, Honorable Minister. Someone goes on to say, the question is the unemployment of youth. With all these things you're talking about, there's nothing mentioned about it. Good evening, distinguished panelists. This is Tabi Victoria, a student of BCom at MUBS. Import substitution can indeed cushion the financial year 2024-2025 by reducing trade deficits, encouraging local industry, encouraging government revenues, improving the balance of payment. However, it is carefully planned and implemented considering the initial investment. Okay, thank you very much. Lastly, before we take a break, good evening, panelists. I thank the Minister for presenting speaking to his two questions. What has helped Uganda to raise this money to 72 trillion? Have the budgets been boosted also the local governments, and as if the percentages for them? I think he's asking about local revenue. Is the local government enrollment and incorporated in the local government budgets? Is it true by July we shall have received the final budget and call circulars? Okay. This is Tumsime Vincent Chisanja, District Councillor from Obende. And finally, Alex says he's watching from Busoga. Okay. We'll come back, and in the next segment, we'll be discussing the possibility that import substitution can be able to cushion this country, bring the balance of trade together, and also be able to help with our deficit. This and more after this break.
Honorable Jacqueline Chatuhaire, chairperson of the Association of Parliamentary Alumni of Uganda, invites distinguished members and parliamentary alumni to the third annual general meeting of the association. The meeting will take place on Friday, the 31st of May, 2024, at the Parliamentary Conference Hall, Parliamentary Building, starting promptly at 8 a.m. The AGM will elect new leadership in accordance with Article 6 and Article 8, Clause 1 of the Constitution of the Parliamentary Alumni of Uganda. The Right Honorable Anita Mong, Speaker of the Parliament of Uganda, will be the chief guest. Other notable guests will include the Right Honorable Colonel Retired Nue Amanya Mushega, Secretary General Emeritus of the East African Community, and the Right Honorable Danfred Kidega, Speaker Emeritus of the East African Community. Come one, come all, for a grand reunion where the alumni will gracefully flourish together.
Fellow countrymen and women, especially the Bazukuru, as we work towards realizing Uganda's Vision 2040, It is important that we plan based on accurate information about our people and our resources. I therefore would like to announce the 6th National Population and Housing Census that will start on the 10th of May, 2024. The information from the National Population and Housing Census will support government, the private sector, cultural and religious institutions, civil society, and development partners in service delivery. It will also provide the basis for planning the provision of social services such as education, health, and transport, among many others, at the national and local levels. When data collectors or enumerators come to your home during the census, please avail yourselves and provide them with honest answers to their questions. This is in order to enable them to process the most accurate information about you, your household, institutions, and community. I therefore call upon all political, cultural, and religious leaders, private sector players, civil society, the media, and the institutions of the government to support this key national program. The successful execution of this census will influence the well-being of all Ugandans and progress the country towards the desired socio-economic transformation. I wish you all a successful census for God and my country.
Nyati Motion Pictures brings you Tuko Pamoja, Kingdoms of the Moon Rwenzori segment. Who are the people occupying the foothills of the fabled mountains of the moon? What strings them together?
One way of identifying ourselves would be the Rwenzori Mountain,
where the god Happy dwells.
In Uganda, we are called Bakonjo, Bakonzo, Baira. In Congo, we are called Banande.
Ababuisa barukiro bwingi, n'abamba barukiro bwingi, bali mu Congo.
The Basongora community is a very old community here, Western Uganda and Eastern Congo.
So both Kasese, Toro were part of Nyoro Kitara Kingdom.
we are similar people.
We are one. Use that word pamoja.
Premiering Saturday 25th May 2024 from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Ndere Center in Ntinda. To get a ticket, call 0778 787 660. Tuko Pamoja?
Welcome back from that quick commercial break. Even off air, we discuss very pertinent issues. My name is Timothy Nyangweso, and this is the last leg of Behind the Headlines. I'm joined by Professor Sarah Sali, John Mwalugembe, Julius Mukunda, and the Honorable Minister, Henry Musasizi. And let me get some feedback here, some pressing information that is coming through. Good evening, Timothy. My concern goes to the Minister. Well aware that the country we could not realize the full budget of 2023-2024, which magic bullet are they planning to use to achieve the huge budget of 72 trillion with a poor population and collapsing businesses? 2, we are informed that we lose about 10 trillion in corruption per year. Tough to see. And it curtails the, how do they plan to curtail this evil, and has the minister put provisions for this? Okay. We know that more than 50% of the budget is funded through borrowed money, and it's going to the majority of domestic this time. Shall our businesses survive? Because most of the commercial banks will, this is something I think John spoke about. Let me get to someone else. Good evening. I'm glad that the minister is present. This is Daniel from Mukono. Thank you, Minister, for elaborating the 72 trillion, and I support the decision to clear it off the accrued debt by BOU and to finance ventures like SGR, the EC, NERA. However, my question to the Honorable Minister, the 72 trillion budget finally dropped back to the amount of 60s, of the 60s. It skipped after these upcoming events are completed. We shall be left with a surprise shooting up of 80 trillion in the next financial year, even after all these ventures have been done. Okay? One more, then we can. This is Clovis Natkwasa, Clovis from Kabale. What hurts me is that when these big bosses are inside the house debating on the extravagancy, they forget the poor police constables that are guarding them, standing outside very hungry. They have a problem to eat alone. This is what I am following. Okay, thank you for the feedback. Honorable Minister, let's get into import substitution. One of the biggest burdens is the surpluses we have in the country. If we look at milk, for example, billions of liters that we produce and then limited liters of milk that we drink as a country, how do we leverage on what we have as surpluses to export to benefit from? And also, what can this budget do to mitigate the huge import bill and support export?
The surpluses of milk and what?
I was giving an example of milk.
With the president and the team have just returned from Kenya, where they had a number of engagements with the government of Kenya on how to deal with mainly the non-tariff barriers and how to grow the regional market. And we have had a number of engagements in the region and also at continental level. I think we need to strengthen mechanisms which can make us leverage on the regional market for our products. But to achieve value from these regional markets, which the president is always out there looking out for, we must add value. Import substitution largely is about producing locally those products which we have previously been importing. There are two things in there. One, they must be of quality, and they must be able to be, because when you produce, you must export. In order to export, you need the market. So we have had a number of deliberate efforts to open up our market through dealing with both tariff and the non-tariff barriers. And I'm happy, like the Kenya engagement opened our markets again for the milk, for the poultry, for the juice, and other things, where our people have been having a problem. The next question is, over time.
Let's first stay there, Honorable Minister.
Yes.
You've talked about Kenya and the president being there. I also remember last year we were in Serbia. The year before, I think earlier on that year, 2023, we were in Dubai.
And South Africa.
Do these engagements ever bear fruit?
Yes, like today, before I came here, I met the permanent secretary of Geraldine Sali, Minister of Trade. She was telling me, we have our businessman here called Andrew Muchiwi. He has an order of agricultural produce, be it maize, be it tomatoes, be it what, to South Africa. He's instead not able to satisfy the orders. But the South African visit which we made some time back has resulted into that market. So Timothy, what I want Ugandans to really, I have a problem. As me, I am always an optimistic person. I am always positive. But when you see most of our people negative all the time, You have gone to Algeria. Has the market come? The market will not come. You have done this. With that attitude, you will never reach anywhere in life. Some of the interventions under import substitution will not give you results tomorrow. You will see the results after 5 years or so, in the medium term and in the long term. But we must start now. The COVID experience, if it didn't teach us lessons, then we shall never learn. We reached a situation, a point where the whole world closed and we had to survive on our own. That is what import substitution is seeking to achieve. And me, from the numbers, when I see the value of exports growing and the value of imports declining, however much we still import more and export less, but in terms of value, in terms of performance, you see the curve of exports going up and the one of imports going down. For me, that is really good news for me. Julius can add from there. I don't have to monopolize the debate.
But Honorable Minister, sticking with you before I get to Julius, some of the economies in the region practice a bit of protectionism, even as much as we want to put out our products there. Yes, the quality is a question you have put out, and it's pretty understandable. But this protectionism and also dumping, really, will it support import substitution as a desire for this economy? For this
dumping
budget?
In a sense that
products from China, just recently the US has put taxes on things coming through from China, just to be able to prohibit it from coming into that. An economy where it is free to dump things. But also we have economies within the region, because we're landlocked as a country, and they're doing protectionism of their companies.
I think from the investment perspective, our policy of as a government is that we must continue our advocacy to attract as many investors as possible, to attract foreign direct investment as much as possible. And to achieve this, we must have favorable, we must create an enabling and a favorable environment. That's why we say, number one, we have a deliberate strategy to develop our industrial parks so that our investors are able to operate in an environment which is conducive. Two, we have deliberate strategy on incentives. The incentives we give to the investors are also attractive to bring them in. And also, when you look at our policy on they call it capital flight. Here in our economy, you can invest, you can make your money from here, and be allowed to take away your profit. As long as profit repatriation, you can repatriate as long as you have paid our taxes. We have no problem. So we are not yet at the level where we can begin. Let's trade with others. Let's remove the non-tariff barriers, because we still have to grow a number of things. We are still fighting with value addition, with quality issues, with the market issues, and all other challenges we face. It is not, I feel it is not yet time to bring things like some economies have the minimum wage things. This is not the best time to talk about it for our economy. This is not the time to be restrictive. We really must create a favorable, we must incentivize a number of things so that we are able to attract the investors we want, and then in the future, at some levels of growth, we shall begin that conversation and debate which you are trying to bring.
Julius, let me come to you. Especially an ordinary Ugandan looks at this budget, 72.1 trillion shillings, looks at the taxes, looks at what IFRIS has been doing. How do we solve this puzzle of import substitution? The minister has spoken about ATM, agriculture, technology, minerals, and import substitution, especially in the area of agriculture, is a low-hanging fruit. How do we solve this puzzle?
I think my take on that is, let me take it from where the minister stopped. He talked about the incentives we give to the investors. You know, you come, and I think one of the debatable things is about the tax exemptions we give them to come in, which I think we need to revise it, because I think it is being abused. We need to see how we can be able to benefit from it. If I come as an investor and you give me the exemptions and I end up becoming a Chapati investor, we need to be able to look at that. Because you see, because by the time you come to Uganda, by the time you come to Uganda, we expect you, at least when you said, I'm going to add value to the tomatoes, isn't it? So that the values he's talking about, so that we know that our tomatoes are going to add value to be of a better value, but also a better quality. If you're an investor, you can't do that. We need to begin to revise our tax exemption procedures. But I think for me, I don't know. And he said, the minister says he's optimistic. I think all of us we are. But there are things you see that have been practiced over and over again. And sometimes you don't believe that you are likely to have any meaningful change out of them. And let us use the example of Kenya. We've been fighting with Kenya about this market, Kenyan market. Poultry, you know, the eggs, the poultry, the milk, even the maize. Today, when they are in scarcity, they will open the borders. But when they have any plenty, that's when they close the borders. Yours is not that. The president has negotiated. There's one day when the Minister of Agriculture actually went there, even they signed an MOA. They said, now things are going to be okay. But the moment this cabinet secretary wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, the border is closed. Why? Let me be in the shoes of the Kenyan government. They also produce maize. They also produce poultry. They also produce milk. And our milk, it is the same. Surprisingly, Ugandan milk is producing cheaply. The maize production here is produced cheaply. The eggs here are produced cheaply. And when they come to Kenya, they flood the market. So you are affecting the Kenyan farmer. So politically, somehow, something must be done to ensure that you protect your own farmers. If I was this government, this business of fighting with the Kenyans about our poultry every day now and then, I would forget about it. I would rather go and look for market anywhere where I know I have another advantage. What are our ambassadors doing in these embassies? For me, the first key performance indicator for any ambassador is how much of Ugandan products have been shipped into that country. That would be my first one. If there is nothing, pack your bags and come back to Uganda, and we say to Timothy. That is the only way we can guarantee markets for our products. The second thing for us to work on exporting our products, for me, is about understanding the market. And I think Professor talked about it. The business of telling our PDM beneficiaries, please have 1 million and go and dig, is not going to work. Somebody needs to come with an idea and say, do you know what, I intended to dig. I intended to produce tomatoes. I need money. So they can give you the money. But you can't say, let me get the money, then I plan. That's, I mean, John will tell you that won't work. So, and with this PDM money, let me tell you, by the end of this year, we are going to be flooded with a lot of agricultural products. And they will not have a market to be sold. In the next cycle, nobody is going to produce anything. So we need to understand what kind of market are we going to sell to. And that's why you find in other countries, they invest very heavily in finding markets for their products. If Japan wants squared watermelons, then they come to Uganda. Then Ugandans will look for squared watermelons. But however good your watermelon is, and the market wants a square watermelon, and it was still around, they will not take it. So the fact is that investing in marketing of our products But now we decided to rationalize Uganda Export Promotion Board. So I don't know who is going to start looking for markets for our products. So looking for markets, Timothy, is very, very important. But investing in looking for these markets. Our neighbors here, we produce the same products. And sometimes I don't blame them when they wake up one day and they say, you know what, your milk has something, we are not going to take it. Maybe the milk, our milk is okay, but simply they're also trying to protect their domestic market and their farmers. So if we don't do that, then that becomes a whole lot of a problem. Our industrial parks must function. They are not functioning at 100%. We need to make sure that they all are functioning, that the electricity is fully connected, that the water is fully connected, that the physical plans for those industrial parks are all there, so that at least we know that that is going to be a center that is going to churn out the exports for our product. And of course, I mean, we are also losing out. AGOA was cancelled by the Americans, remember? And I think that was a setback, especially for our cotton industry, that we need to look out for. The other part also, I think, is to invest in, and I'm glad that I've seen, at least for the first time, I'm seeing a 30 billion allocation for seed certification. Because among the challenges that are facing this country is fake seeds, the fake inputs. Because if you have that, you won't produce the right products. But I'm hoping that this money is going to be used rightly to ensure that we have the right inputs that farmers are able to use. Timothy, there is something which the minister mentioned, and I just wanted also probably to add on it, and it was around expanding the tax. And I have two proposals for me. One is URA must look for partners. There is no way URA will collect taxes on all our borders across the country. It is impossible. If it can have partnerships with the district borders, they can be able to control smuggling, but it can also be a win-win situation between URA and these districts. Each and every district in this country has got a property register. They know which properties are in their district. If URA would have a partnership with the districts, so that once they are collecting their property rates, at the same time they can also collect rent where it is applicable. That is a win-win situation for URA, because currently they are collecting around 10% of the rental taxes that they are supposed to be collecting. So those are some of the things, small low-hanging fruit that you can use to expand taxation base and reduce these increments that sometimes cause a lot of inconvenience. Thank you.
John, let me come to you. The idea of import substitution is amazing. The reality of how to implement it, especially looking at our exchange with BOU, 3.4 months that we have there, but also your traders that have been at loggerheads when the last meeting they had with the president, him telling them, you know what, you need to do things here. When you look at us as a country, what is our value proposition, especially in this discussion of import substitution? What do we bring to the table?
Okay, so first of all, this idea of import substitution is not a new idea. In the 1960s, after independence, most African governments took this route. In fact, for Uganda, we adopted a policy of overvaluing our exchange rate. Why? In order to make it more difficult to import. And we had a trade surplus at that point, about over 138 trillion in today's currency. Later in the 80s, the World Bank came up with a new idea of liberalization and free trade and so on. So now we're introducing this idea of import substitution in a changed regime of the World Trade Organization, in a trade regime of where countries are advocating for the removal of tariffs. So it becomes very hard. How do you promote import substitution in this kind of context? Because the tools that you would use, the tariffs, the quotas, the exchange rate controls, those are things now you can't easily maneuver with. So I would say it's a good idea because the import bill is huge. If you look at textiles, and this is where I've disagreed with our colleagues from Kasite, especially on the cotton, textiles, and apparel sector. For any country to industrialize, if you look at how China has industrialized as well, this low-level manufacturing that starts in textiles and apparels and so on is normally the basis. And it tends to absorb a lot of unskilled labor, huge numbers of unskilled labor. So if we are going to say if we earn $680 million through exporting coffee, and we spend 880 million importing fabric and textiles, it means all our coffee receipts we spend plus an additional $200 million. So it doesn't make sense really, if long term. And any sensible Ugandan would understand that that is a path that is destructive for us as a country. So I'm aligned with the President's approach of import, not just the President, but government's approach of import substitution and building local capacity. But now the issue is how do you go about it? I think government has taken the approach of industrialization, which is okay, relying primarily on foreign direct investment. My view is that you want to promote not just foreign direct investment, but backward and forward linkages between foreign investors and local SMEs. Because at the end of the day, these foreign investors cannot operate in a vacuum. If you look at export, where do we export? We are exporting mainly to DRC. We are exporting mainly to Sudan. If you're looking, we now have a trade deficit with Tanzania, and I don't agree with Julius, by the way. We are importing, I don't know if you've been to Mutukula. You can go there tomorrow morning and just check what's coming in. Onions are coming in, rice is coming in, mangoes are coming from Kenya, tomatoes. So I think this is where PDM needs to solve this issue. This issue of just bringing together enterprise groups, this one is a tailor, this one is a carpenter, and so on, and then they just share money and disappear. Money should be given based on joint activities. So they should say this group should focus on growing Irish. We want production to improve through PDM. No? So get people who are in a related venture and then support them to make sure that they improve that. So for me,
are you suggesting, John, that
I'm saying
specialization could be...
Yes, clustering and specialization. This issue of having circles, I don't mind circles, but I want more production cooperatives. See, if you're in an area, because we already know, like in this area, if you go to Kavale and that Chigezi region, I have Irish. Yes. If I go to the north, I have Sirius. If I have, so in Uganda, we already know what grows where. So let us make sure we invest through PDM. Let us focus on those things. These other groups, my constituencies, can get from Emyoga, no problem. PDM should focus on boosting production. That is my idea, anyway. So that's my thinking about that. And then the other issue with import substitution is that as you import substitute, other countries also import substitute. Because there's this imagination that Kenya is not import. They also import substitute, meaning they are making it more difficult for your products to access their markets because they are also trying to think the way you're thinking. That's why you have these non-tariff barriers. And when we talk about non-tariff barriers, it's as if Uganda is not a culprit itself. I was looking at a report the other day, and I saw that we imposed an import duty on bar soap, I think, from Kenya. And then they also have certain complaints. I think they've made more mistakes than us, but we have also, to a certain extent, imposed some non-tariff barrier. We shouldn't project ourselves like the angel who does no wrong, and Kenya is really pushing us to that. So I think this issue of non-tariff barriers needs to be addressed, and I appreciate the visit by His Excellency to Kenya. It's one of our major markets, and it's important that we don't have any disagreements, or we reduce the number of non-tariff barriers to the minimum. Now, I also want to comment on the issue of, I think the Honorable Minister asked me to comment on the issue of formalization. I completely agree. We need more people paying tax, but this is a gradual process. We need to educate. We shouldn't just take the stick approach. It should be the stick and the carrot. It means you must move against them through TREP or whatever, but you must also create incentives. What does a formal business gain? For some of us who have run formal businesses, the cost of maintaining a formal business, not just making it formal, but maintaining it, it's not easy. You have to pay NSSF even when you're not earning. You have to pay PAYE just to keep the company in the clean books, so that when a tender comes, when you ask for the tax clearance, they give it to you. So it's not easy, you know. And so what is that incentive regime that we are putting in place to attract our SMEs to make sure that they are formal? And then the other issue, and we should also avoid moving too aggressively in this area. And I would use the example of IFRIS. You see, when it started, even members of parliament were saying, we are opposed to this IFRIS what tax. You see, we don't like this IFRIS tax. At that point, URA should have said, you know, we have a problem. This thing, no one understands it, you see. So this IFRIS, it shows that they were moving faster than the population. Okay? So by the time people understood, in fact, this last meeting with the president engaged in tax education, in my view. He was teaching traders how to import substitute, how to file tax returns, and so. In other words, URA delegated their duty to His Excellency, you see. So for me, therefore, education, tax education is extremely important to ensure that people come along with you as you introduce these tax measures. Most people are not opposed, because there are some few bad apples. For instance, for IFRIS, some people are taking this VAT money. Oh, yeah. And they know that with IFRIS, they won't take it anymore. And then you find that they push people who don't even fall within the VAT bracket. Because now, if all the people who came to Kororo find that the people who fall into the VAT bracket may have been less than 10%. See? So how do we ensure? It goes back to tax education. How do we bring our people along as we try to formalize them? And finally, I'll talk about the aspect of investors. We like investors very much, but we like investors who come with money, who come with technology, and who come with expertise. Okay? What we don't want are investors who come and find here the land, the money. Sometimes they even find the technology here. So they just bring themselves and they find everything here. So what we are saying is, to bring an investor, let us vet them better so that we get the very best. So that when an investor comes, they're actually bringing value. If they say, I've done this, I've set up a pharmaceutical industry before, they demonstrate where did they set it, how did it work, and so on and so forth. Let not Uganda become an experimental ground for speculators. See, someone comes, I'm going to set up an industrial park based on artificial intelligence and green energy. Then they say, okay, you have 2 square miles. And then nothing moves, and so on and so forth. So the issue of investors and making sure we get the right investors is critical. And I want to appreciate the Uganda Investment Authority. They have recently launched the Domestic Investors Division.
Thank you.
Support local investors. That is good, and we hope that they can continue on that path.
And I hope when we're almost to the end, you can comment on what incentives are necessary for local investors to thrive in such a market. Professor, let me come to you. When we talk about import substitution, especially the textile that John has spoken about, something that the traders and the president at loggerheads, $3.5 or $3 per kilo, 35%. It's prohibitive for textile. But let me ask, how prepared are we for import substitution as a country? Both agriculture and in other areas.
Thank you very much, Timothy. I think I want to share what a member said here before. Import substitution is not new. Import substitution has been historical to this country. And he talked about the fixing of the forex, but at that time even the countries undertook to industrialize so that they can produce. If you look at what we import, and may I take import substitution really as producing, I think he defined it very well, producing locally what you've been importing. You look at foodstuffs are like number 10 in the whole thing. Clothing or textiles are like number 9. I think we need to find out what are the biggest drivers of our import budget. You're talking about petroleum products, you're talking about machinery, including spare parts, which we need actually to run the factories. You're talking about base metals, you're talking about vegetable oils, you're talking about so many things. So before we even come to foodstuffs and fabrics, there's a big thing we need to do there, okay? For oil, we know the government is working on the pipeline, and that's why we said oil is the low-hanging factor there. But of course, we also need to see in the budget that the Ministry of Finance is bringing, have they budgeted for the things that will enable that oil to flow? I think sometime back we talked about 400 million for the pipeline and to actualize those businesses. So that is one way they are preparing for import substitution, by saying this is the sector which is a low-hanging fruit, which has so many knock-on effects or benefits. So if we invest in that, then one, we shall not bring the oil, but also the oil sector comes with other kind of materials in terms of chemicals and all those kinds of things. So it's still early days, but the journey starts. The production of equipment is another thing we need to go to. It's going to be a long journey, but it is important. At least, of course, we have Chira EV and the rest, but if we had a factory to make the spare parts, that would be good. And I will tell you why I have some hope in this area. In the past, in the medical sector, everything of a diagnostic nature was imported. Or if the machines came in, you also had to import the technicians to come and fix that machine each time it broke down. Right now, you have small entities that have come up like MHS. I don't know whether you know MHS in Intinda. They now make some of that equipment. They have also trained people to service those machines. We are no longer having people flown in to do that. But also in the universities, you have what they call biomedical engineering as a course, and students are doing that. So we can start that journey. And I know they have already justified import substitution, but it is one thing about the ideological orientation of the country, but it is also very important for saving forex, and it's very important for many things. And because I distinguish between import substitution and trade, okay? You can have trade, but we are talking about import substitution here. But I think after we have talked about that, I think as we are discussing import substitution, the ministry will, the country will have to identify where do we get bigger value or more value from import substitution. It's true you can, I don't know what we import in terms of food from Kenya, let's say Blue Band, you can do that. That will actually save you some dollars. But it is much more valuable if you do import substitution for the things on which you are spending most of your tax dollars on. And I think that's where the government needs to look to. But of course, there will also be the question of how quickly is it possible to domestically produce, okay? So for oil, we've said it is a little bit easier. We have been given a timeline. For machinery, we have a journey to go. For many other things we shall have, for agro-processing, maybe that one is nearer. But for other things, we need to go, and for machinery, because like one of our biggest in terms of taking our tax dollars, we still need to go there. But now that's where government then partners with the investors to come and locally produce these things here. Because each time things are produced elsewhere, the increased consumption of those things does not benefit your local market. Look at all of us now. We all carry tablets. We all carry mobile phones. But because we're not producing those phones, the increased demand for those phones, the increased consumption of those technologies benefits the home country where they're coming from. So if they were produced locally, then that money would stay here. Of course, the jobs in the industrial parks would increase where they're assembling these things. People would carry themselves into the tax bracket because after they have made some money, they will want to take a beer, they will want to take a soda, and that soda will have some VAT on and whatever other taxes that come with it. So to make this easier then is, in addition to bringing the investors, the rightful investors members have talked about, you also make it easier. Like the ministry has said, this place, the minister, provide services like electricity, provide services like roads, provide whatever the investor and the private sector needs, even if that private sector is Ugandan, to be able to produce, because government will not produce everything, and try to bring down the costs. Today I was discussing with someone, and it was interesting that the observation that is an apple from South Africa, even as imported as it is, even with the transportation costs, coming onto the Ugandan market with all the taxes, will still be cheaper than an apple produced in Uganda, in Mukono. Why? So even when it's produced in Mukono, vis-a-vis the one from South Africa, because of the cost difference, people still eat the South African apple. So the issue is, how do we make the Mukono apple become consumed by Ugandans? How do we lower the costs of producing? And the other example which was given was about sugar. I don't know whether it still occurs, where the Brazilian sugar arrived here and it was still cheaper than the Madivan sugar, but maybe that has been worked on since it's a big sector. So one, as I said, we have all dealt with the reasons for import substitution. Two, we need to categorize those areas where we get the biggest value for import substitution. And third is how quickly how quickly is it possible for us to do the import substitution? And then from there, we shall then see how do we need to incentivize those who are in that sector. And to go back to your question, it is possible. It may take some time, but it is possible, it is necessary, it is a must. And as a country, we need to go there. But we shouldn't forget what the minister said. How do we increase the value of what we produce? Remember, as my neighbor has said, we are not the only country talking import substitution. So for us to be able to penetrate those markets, we have to produce something more valuable than what they're producing. If we want to do import substitution at our high costs, at our high taxes, and at our low values, you'll produce something which even Ugandans can't take, and therefore the neighbors will also not consume it. So for it to be consumed locally and across the borders, it must be of a certain value and at a certain price. And that is something that the ministry and the economists have to work on.
Professor, sticking with you, one of the other ones is especially human capital flight.
Yes.
You're training a biotech engineer, but the next day he's leaving because there's greener pastures.
Yeah, but
how do we, because we need this human capital in this import substitution value chain.
Yes, but you see, the economy is, sorry, the economy is linked. And maybe that's why you actually need to do import substitution. The economy is linked in that you have the actual capital investments and you also have the human resource. If you don't address or you don't do import substitution, it means you will not industrialize. You will not invest in those things where this high-skilled labor force is required. So the biotech engineer will actually leave you if you don't have a company like MHS, okay? But if you have very many MHSs producing medical diagnostic equipment and their spare parts and everything, why would this person have to leave, okay? Because as they produce, they will also go into partnership, and those who purchase them will actually purchase the service, the equipment, it will be used. Those who use as users of the equipment in the different hospitals will actually use it. Right now, our scientists and high caliber scientists leave because you're not going to be the best chemist, the best physicist to come out and just be a teacher. When you're being demanded in an industry in the US, you're being demanded by an industry in Europe, labor moves to find where it gets the highest value. So as a university and as a country, you train, and you train the best engineers, best economists, best chemists and whatever. But if you don't put the industries where these people will go and apply their knowledge, they will actually leave you. So it's not enough to talk STEM up to higher education level. You need to address the sector where these services are going to be consumed, where these people are going to be employed, and they apply their knowledge to that kind of thing. Because if you don't do that, you know, the US, some people have ridiculed the US for not having very good undergraduate education. And one of the arguments is that actually they don't need it because they do talent hopping and talent seeking. So they will pick whoever is high caliber, whether you're coming from India, whether you're coming from Uganda, whether you're whatever, the US will have you. But they will invest a lot at higher level, at postgraduate level. Because at undergraduate level, regardless of the quality of their universities, they collect talent from all over the world.
Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
Let me read just a bit of the messages so that I can give you your parting shots there. Good evening, Timothy. Looking at the budget breakdown, there is allotment to the RRH, which are allocated 286.434 billion. And special meals and drinks allocated.
What is RRH?
I'm not sure what he meant by RRH, but what I get is special meals and special drinks allocated 300 billion. Special meals and special drinks are meant for logistical, and in terms of its priorities to health services. I think it's talking about ministries that are receiving special meals and special?
No. That one has gone into a chart of accounts. That can be a separate debate.
Okay.
That's a chart. It's actually.
This is Angiro from Katakwi there. Good evening, Timothy and the panelists. My name is Wilson from Moyenga. The budget would not have been a problem if much of it was going into widening the collection of taxes with ease. By overcrowding the domestic market, businesses and commercial banks means more businesses will close their doors and continue to narrow the tax base. This is going to increase joblessness, increase crime, threaten business performance. What then do we expect the impoverished population to rely on, especially for an ambitious budget? This is James Odere. James says, the discussion, but my fear with the budget of 2024-2025, from 52 trillion to 72 trillion is corruption. All ministers of the government in Uganda most likely will be working for 20 trillion shillings and will not be seen. But it's already in their apartments in Kampala Hills, as people say, as the census is ongoing. Thank you very much. Good evening, dear elite. I am commenting on Professor Sarah's communication. It's true that most Ugandans' taxes come from Kampala Wakiso, and the services are extended to the rest of the parts of the country. However, it's right to consider that not all taxpayers in the central come from the central. Majority of them actually come up country. It is right for government to ensure equitable distribution. This is Flavia from Arua. Okay? Good evening, panelists. Alan, looking at the national envelope and the finances, the state of health in Uganda, alarming. No drugs, hospitals, doctors-patient ratio, overwhelming. Staff housing, alarming. Like in Apache, the general hospital, taxpayers deserve better services. Finally, my question is to the minister. What does government plan to begin taxing producers of concrete products like fences, fencing poles, pavers, building blocks? I think it is a good tax area. These people are making a lot of money, but they're still going tax-free, yet a border cyclist is paying more. Stephen Wills in Mbale. Okay. A lot of messages coming through, but we really appreciate that. I'll start with the professor, then I'll go to John, Julius, finally the Honorable Minister for your parting shots.
Yes, thank you, Timothy. I think for my parting shots is that I am happy that the government is seriously considering this area of import substitution, because one of the results is going to be, if it's well handled, the growth of our industries, the growth of our economy, and people are going to be more focused. If we are committed to it and we are more intentional about import substitution, we shall be able to do that. Because as my neighbor said, this is a journey we undertook as newly developed independent countries in the 60s. We were only diverted from that path by neoliberalism in the 80s, and we have lived long enough to know that it has not all been rosy. We've just become dumping grounds of other people's products. So let us actually take this journey, and there are issues, of course, within the budget, within expenditure, but those are issues that can be fixed. The government has investigative mechanisms to fix where they think there is wastage, but that should not derail us from the main thing. So let's keep the main thing, and that is, where do we want to go as a country? What do we want to do in the interest of self-determination as a country? We cannot say much and determine our destiny when we do not produce what we consume and consume what we do not produce, as Mazrui said. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. John Mulgembe.
Well, I agree with my neighbor that the import substitution strategy is the right one. If you look at countries that stuck with it, if you look at China, if you look at South Korea, if you look at Brazil, these are countries that are now pushing their weight around through the BRICS. Why? Because they were able to stick with such a policy for a long time. So it's a price that is worth paying, and I would urge my colleagues, some of whom have been making good profits in trade, to start the transition process. You cannot start moving against the tide, that I want to keep importing, but Yes, you've made enough money through importing, now start thinking about manufacturing, adding value, and exports. On the issue of the budget, I would of course urge the private sector to pay their fair share, but also urge government to treat our resources responsibly, to ensure that there's efficiency, not just in tax collection, but also in tax spending. You can't just be efficient when you're collecting. You also be efficient when you're spending, so that we can balance the equation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Julius Mkunda.
Quickly, I think for import substitution, I agree. It's a painful process at the beginning, but we need to be disciplined. If we are going to stick on a policy, let us put all our efforts and investment so that we can at least get what we can out of it. Deal with the quality. We are very good. Coffee is our biggest exporter. It's not just by miracle or by accident. It's because there was a lot of investment in producing quality coffee. Today, if they find you drying your coffee on the bare ground, you are punished. It's against the law. So the same thing, we need to have the same mindset for all other crops and the things that we do. And I'm sure we can achieve that. On the budget, despite the challenges really we are facing, the rushed process and everything, there are very good things in this particular budget. 142 billion on district urban and community roads, 11 billion for Rwenzori Tourism Center, 12 billion for revamping the Nile, the source of the Nile. Our trillion on PDM is still there. I can see here I have talked about the 30 billion for seed certification, which has been our problem. The agricultural credits facility has also been capitalized. UDP has been capitalized. The
UDC has been capitalized.
UDC has been. I mean, they are really good things, and I'm telling. Why I'm saying this is that, as Uganda, let's get ready. The literate is going to come. Let us get ready to ensure that it is utilized properly. Let us be very vigilant, so that at least if the PDM money is there, to make sure that the right people access this particular money, not the ghost people that we don't know. That when agricultural facility is there, that farmers can prepare themselves, go and ensure that they can access these services, because they are for us, and I think that for every budget it is meant for the ordinary citizens. So as we conclude the budget process, I urge Ugandans really to be vigilant, especially in monitoring its usage, because I don't think the minister is going to be around the country to see where each and every coin is, to ensure that primary school is functioning, that health center is functioning, and that all of us can benefit from this particular budget process. Thank you.
Finally, the Honorable Minister.
Two things to end with. One, there has been an alarm ever since Parliament approved the 72 trillion budget. There has been an alarm largely based on perceptions, not the facts. So what we are going to do as Ministry of Finance, together with the stakeholders, including yourselves, we are going to have a budget month. And in this month we shall break down this budget and explain what are those things in there, what constitutes the 72 trillion to the ordinary Ugandan, so that we are able to remove this negative perception that has been created around the 72 trillion budget. But for now and for the future, what is the biggest challenge to deal with? How the challenge is, how can we make our economy competitive? Because many people said here, all these people say that import substitution is what Uganda is looking at, is what any other country in this world is looking at. So how can you make your economy competitive? This is the challenge we have, and all the efforts and the interventions we make are aimed at answering and responding to this challenge. Otherwise, I thank you. I thank the panelists. Thank you for, I've appeared before you for the first time. It's a pleasure. And thank you, UBC, for always giving us a chance to share with Ugandans some of these ideas.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Sarah. Thank you, Mr. John Mwalugembe. Thank you, Mr. Julius Mukunda. Honorable Minister, thank you for coming through even when we invited you. I also want to thank the production team for making sure everything goes according to plan. I also appreciate those that have sent through your messages. Apologies, we could not read all of them, but we'll end this with this quote. A budget tells your money where to go instead of wondering where it should go. Good morning.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Nyati Motion Pictures brings you Tuko Pamoja, Kingdoms of the Moon Rwenzori segment. Who are the people occupying the foothills of the fabled mountains of the moon? What strings them together?
One way of identifying ourselves would be the Rwenzori Mountain,
where the god Happy dwells.
In Uganda, we are called Bakonjo, Bakonzo, Baira. In Congo, we are called Banande.
Ababuisa barukiro bwingi, n'abamba barukiro bwingi, bali mu Congo.
The Basongora community is a very old community here, Western Uganda and Eastern Congo.
So both Kasese, Toro, were part of Nyoro Kitara Kingdom.
We are similar people.
We are one. Use that word, Pamoja.
Premiering Saturday 25th May 2024 from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Ndere Center in Ntinda.
To get a ticket, call 0778 787 660. Tuko Pamoja?
Forces were pushed back from the regional capital as well as around the town of Chasov Yar. This month, the Russian forces launched an offensive in the Kharkov region to establish a buffer zone around its Belgorod border region that's come under repeated Ukrainian shelling. More details now with our correspondent in the region.
We've just received confirmation from the Russian Ministry of Defense of the latest advances in the Donetsk Republic. Russian troops have taken control of the settlement of Klishevka, and this came at a heavy price to Ukrainian armed forces. Around 1,000 men were lost over the last 24 hours. That's killed or wounded, and a lot of military hardware also has gone up in flames. Now, this comes soon after Russian troops liberated the village of Rabotina. Of course, this was symbolic as the only real gain of the Ukrainian failed counter-offensive there. And it comes at a time when the Ukrainian government has implemented this new mobilization, which has caused many men to flee the country rather than face life on the front lines, which is proving very difficult for the Ukrainian army at this stage. Of course, in Kharkov, the Russian troops there are cutting through those defensive lines like a knife through butter, with very serious questions being asked. Of course, this was supposed to be a heavily fortified area. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said at this stage that there are no plans to take control of Kharkov. The aim is really to create a buffer zone to provide some welcome relief for the people of Belgorod, which is coming under a sustained and constant Ukrainian attack.
Now, as battles do continue raging on parts of the front lines, both sides have naturally captured each other's troops. However, now, as Moscow has offered to release 500 Ukrainian POWs to Kiev in an exchange, Ukraine has only selected 38 of the 500 as candidates to be brought back home. Now, the list of prisoners included their full names and dates of birth and was first published by RT's editor-in-chief on her Telegram channel. According to Margarita Simonyan, Kiev has been refusing to exchange them for 4 months and only selected just over 3 dozen to swap with Moscow. Now, Margarita noted that these 38 POWs are from the Azov Battalion and other neo-Nazi formations of the Ukrainian military. I discussed this earlier, this turn of events, shall we say, with independent Dutch journalist Sonja van den End. And she says, considering Ukraine's lack of manpower, its current actions make no sense.
It shows that actually the Azov Battalion is very important for Zelensky regime. I mean, they all say, okay, they're not neo-Nazis, and but they are. I know that. I was there. I saw it. So they are very important for the regime. And the other people, apparently not. But, this is very strange because we all know that Ukraine is lacking soldiers. So I cannot understand if you release your POWs and you treat them, maybe some of them were injured or not. I suppose not, because they were fairly good treated in Russia. I know that. So it's strange. It's like if they don't want them back. I mean, why do you don't want your soldiers back? Or are they afraid? Or maybe we don't know everything. Maybe these soldiers want to stay in Russia. This is also what I heard. I was in Luhansk in January, and there I spoke with some soldiers who were captive. But a lot of them, they don't want to go back because they are very poorly treated in Ukraine. And, they go to the front lines with barely any training. So maybe that is the case with the other soldiers. It doesn't make any sense. Only makes sense when it could be a PR stunt as well, but he doesn't want them back. And he's saying all the time in the press, we don't have enough soldiers and we need to do something. And they can do something now, but this is not going to happen.
Washington is trying to control the narrative over last week's assassination attempt on the Slovak Prime Minister by pushing the lone wolf story. That's not me saying it. That's the claim made by Russian intelligence.
It is notable that the US and its European allies are persistently trying to impose a version of a lone perpetrator, dissatisfied with the decline in the level of democracy in Slovakia. According to information available to the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, American government agencies are already seeking to join the investigation in order to steer it in the right direction. Their goal is to exclude promotion of the topic of political terrorism in Europe, and moreover a potential external trace to the terrorist attack.
Well, Russia's intelligence is saying that basically this assassination attempt shows what the West will resort to when they fail to maintain their hegemony through civilized methods. They're calling it a political terror attack against an opponent. Now, we know that Robert Fico is one of the most pro-Russian politicians in Europe. His re-election in 2023 was largely based on a platform of promises to end military support to Ukraine and also to veto Ukraine's NATO ambitions. So, and then all of a sudden, when this assassination attempt happened, everyone jumped the gun, excuse me for the pun there, jumped the gun to say that basically this was definitely a lone wolf situation.
Well, we're hearing this lone wolf narrative from Western sources, but the Slovak leadership has completely rejected that. What is their stance in this situation?
Yeah, now they're rejecting it, but originally when this happened, they were saying, oh, no, this is a lone wolf situation. Yes, it's politically motivated, but he was acting alone. And they made that conclusion without even having the information, because now we know the attack happened on Wednesday, and they only managed to search the perpetrator's home on Sunday, so 2 days after the attack. And why? Apparently this was due to delays in processing the arrest, the search warrant issued by the judge. The Prime Minister is shot, and you take 2 days to process a search warrant for the perpetrator. Something sounds off here. And meanwhile, by the time they got to his house, guess what happened? Somehow, his online history on his computer was erased. He wasn't at home. His wife says she didn't do it. So who did it? Let's hear some more.
Maybe 2 hours after the crime, someone deleted the perpetrator's entire history of communication on Facebook. It wasn't deleted by him. Even his wife didn't do it.
There's been some assistance here in covering the suspect's tracks. It means that the third party acted for the benefit of the suspect. Plus, there are other clues that say that the facts of Wednesday's attack have been discussed in a wider circle. All of this is shocking.
Now, when they were asked, the defense minister and the deputy prime minister, how this was allowed to happen, why did it take 2 days, they say they can't comment on the situation. They keep pointing the finger at someone else, saying, oh, you need to ask the police or you need to ask the judge what happened. So it's very strange. And also to add to that, the general prosecutor has said that he doesn't, basically they will be looking at requalifying this as a terrorist act once they gather all the information, which is what they should have done. Gather all the information first and then say whether it was or was not a lone wolf situation. This is what's really bizarre in this situation.
Well, the Bulgarian president's come out with a statement saying that the media is to blame for what happened in Slovakia. Can you take us through the sort of argument that's emerged along these lines?
A lot of Fico's allies, mainly in particular, were focusing on what was happening in the media in the country and in general in Europe, this hate rhetoric. But the Bulgarian president spelled it out quite clearly. He said it's unacceptable to continue pushing this narrative that the only solution to the conflict in Ukraine is to continue the war until Russia is defeated. He says, first of all, that's not going to happen. And second of all, it's implausible. And second of all, if you continue pushing that narrative, then of course this will lead to more hate. Let's listen.
The attempted assassination of a European prime minister by a radicalized fanatic because of his support for peace indicates this ingrained intolerance of dissent and hatred. Many politicians, parties, and media have contributed to this by portraying every differing voice as pro-Russian, which is extremely unfair and leads to these negative consequences.
Well, over in Slovakia, the parliament has now resumed its activities on Tuesday, and actually they started by approving the government-led resolution condemning the attack, of course, and also calling on several organizations and media in the country to continue promoting hate and this hate rhetoric. So we'll see what will happen, but also they're continuing his policies. Basically, they're saying that they're moving forward and working in the direction that was set by Robert Fico. So the master plan behind this all has failed.
Just discussing this a bit earlier in the program here on RT with the former CIA analyst. He had strong words, Mr. Larry Johnson. He believes Fico was targeted by certain Western partners.
This individual was not acting on his own. He didn't just wake up that morning and say, I'm going to grab my gun and I think I'm going to go try to shoot Fico. I think they're absolutely being targeted by intelligence agencies. Whether or not it's for assassination purposes, they are essentially being targeted to create and fund political opposition to them, to try to undermine them, to try to discredit them, to try to smear them, because they're really the three flies in the ointment against the United States policy of trying to defeat Russia and to use Ukraine as a springboard to do that. That policy is starting to fall apart. And you know it's not just now Slovakia, Hungary, and Serbia, but also what you're seeing now is with the recognition by three of the other European states, at least Norway, Spain, and then Ireland. So you're starting to see this whole European NATO thing start to come apart. And in that kind of situation, the West gets desperate. There's a sense of desperation and panic right now among Western leaders.
Butcher and war criminal. Those were just among the labels being hurled at the U.S. Secretary of State by pro-Palestinian demonstrators. Antony Blinken was repeatedly interrupted during a speech in Congress.
As a distinguished citizen when you are aiding and abetting this war and this ongoing genocide in Palestine. Shame on everybody here. Shame on you.
Well, 3 Western nations are set to recognize Palestine as an independent state. The decision by Ireland, Norway and Spain officially comes into effect next week.
A Palestinian state is obliged, in line with international law, to live in peace within secure, internationally recognized borders and to comply with all relevant UN resolutions.
I'm confident that further countries will join us in taking this important step in the coming weeks. This is an historic and important day for Ireland and for Palestine.
The time has come to move from words to action, to tell the millions of innocent, suffering Palestinians that we're with them, that there is hope.
More than 140 UN states have recognized Palestine since 1988, which is already most of the world. On Wednesday, 3 more countries, Spain first, followed by Norway and Ireland, have joined the chorus, frustrated at the lack of peace progress and hoping to send a symbolic message of support to Palestinians by this move, and also try to boost political changes that will eventually, hopefully, they believe, bring an end to Israel's deadly war in Gaza that some describe as genocide. Israel started its military operation in the Palestinian enclave back in October as a response to Hamas's attack on southern Israeli communities, when hundreds were murdered and taken hostage, claiming the goal is to destroy Hamas, that has been ruling the Strip since 2006. But the almost 8-month-long war claimed more than 35,000 Palestinian lives already, and that made many among the global community concerned and question Israel's approach. More and more rally for Palestine, while Israel is finding itself isolated. The decision of Ireland, Norway and Spain will take into force starting May 28th. Although the 3 countries made it clear the move is not against Israel, but rather for peace and political settlement, Israel reacted furiously. The country's foreign minister ordered the Israeli ambassadors to Oslo and Dublin to immediately return to Israel. Here's his statement.
Ireland and Norway intend to send a message to the Palestinians and the whole world today. Terrorism pays. After the terrorist organization Hamas carried out the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, after it committed the most horrific sex crimes the world has seen, these countries chose to give a reward to Hamas and Iran and recognize a Palestinian state.
Israeli foreign minister also warned that the hasty step will have serious consequences on the relationship between the states, without mentioning, though, what measures could be taken. And foreign minister is far from the only Israeli politician, of course, expressing his disdain with the decision of the European states. Israel's finance minister, known for his extreme right-wing position and openly anti-Palestinian views, sent a letter to Prime Minister Netanyahu demanding an appropriate response, offering as an option to authorize the construction of 10,000 new units in the Jewish settlements across the West Bank, or Judean Samaria. This is how Israel calls this area. Smotrich also urged Netanyahu to stop collecting and transferring taxes to the Palestinian Authority, to cancel all privileges for Palestinian VIPs when it comes to crossing into Israel and the outside world, and impose sanctions on them instead. Also, we hear that the Israeli defense minister now gives instructions to allow Israelis to enter an area in the north of the West Bank where it was forbidden for them to cross since 2005, and that means we might see Jewish outposts and settlements in that area too in the coming future. The idea behind the recognition is the gradual establishment of a Palestinian state under the leadership of the Palestinian Authority, and that move is rejected by Israel. And no surprise the news was taken negatively. Some politicians, including from the ruling coalition, support and believe only in one-state solution. Israel's national security minister even said recently that he wants to move to Gaza after the war, and when Israel will have a full control over the Strip, repopulated by Jewish settlers like himself. Here's what Ben-Gvir had to say.
What do you mean by Jewish settlement? Should we go back to the settlements we left during the disengagement?
Not only. It's possible to let many more people in. And if there is emigration, and hundreds of thousands are leaving, you can bring more and more people in.
And you will be the first to go and live there to encourage Jews to settle there?
I will be very happy to live in Gaza.
Will you do this if there is an opportunity?
Of course. Why not?
The news was certainly welcomed by Palestinian officials. President Abbas has said he appreciated the efforts made by Norway for the sake of the Palestinian people, while another top Palestinian official, Mr. Sheikh, called the move a historic moment where the free world is winning with the help of truth and justice. Ireland and Norway are now calling other states to follow them, and the estimates here in Jerusalem are that there could indeed be more countries choosing to recognize Palestine in the near future.
A win-win all around. That's how Nigeria has hailed new investment agreements with China, saying they have the potential to unlock the continent.
We need each other. The sustainable path to success is a two-way street. We assure you that your investment is safe in our country. Once you've succeeded here, I know your reputation in other countries will be further strengthened. The door is open for partnership, and partnership that will add value to both sides. I'm happy that you're partnering Nigeria in so many ways.
Nigeria is not just looking to boost ties with Beijing. And last month, negotiations began with Russia to revive a vast steel mill project, which is seen as pivotal to maintaining the country's industrialization over the coming years. While back in March, the foreign ministers of the two countries met in Moscow, with Sergei Lavrov proclaiming Nigeria a priority partner for Russia on the African continent. So we hit the streets to get local reaction in Nigeria to what are blossoming new partnerships.
I ask myself, do we have an infrastructural deficit? Yes. Do we need help? Yes. So I think that what is more important is getting that help as much as possible. And we're also looking at ways to maximize other developmental fronts. So signing up with Russia and China, I think it's the way that the government currently sees as a viable opportunity to quickly accelerate development. And I think it's a welcome development also.
Nigeria, partnering with Russia and China, only just points to the fact that there is so much for Nigeria to gain economically from these other countries than from the West. Russia, for one, is one of the largest exporters of some certain commodities like wheat. So in that sense, partnership between two countries, might benefit Nigeria in terms of, getting.
We are looking at the China and the Russia situation, right? And we see that these two countries are formidable forces on their own, where they have, different comparative advantages.
We're staying in Africa, where a third American has been busted in the Democratic Republic of the Congo for his involvement in a failed coup attempt. His name is Taylor Thompson. He joins two other American citizens, Benjamin Ruben Zalman-Pollen and 21-year-old Marcel Malanga. Now, this attack on the presidential palace took place on Sunday. According to army officials, a group of around 50 armed men tried to storm the compound. Footage are showing the aftermath, bullet casings, blood, and some broken glass as well. Now, security forces quickly intervened. They were able to arrest the assailants. During the shootout, the group's leader was killed. The spokesman for the Congolese army declared that a takeover was prevented.
An attempted coup has been nipped in the bud by the defense and security forces. The attempt involved foreigners and Congolese. They were put out of action, including their leader.
We spoke with a member of parliament in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He said the nation is still waiting for any statement from the governments of the countries whose citizens were involved.
We are waiting to see the response from those different countries. Up to now, we didn't have any statement from the U.S. Department. The only thing we got is a small message, a tweet we got from the embassy of the U.S. Embassy in Kinshasa, that they are waiting also to get more information about their citizens that are involved in the attempt. But what we know, there are a lot of U.S. people, and Canada, UK, and Europe. So we are waiting for the official statement from those countries, but even from our country, so people can see really what is going on.
That's the programme for now here at RT International, live from Moscow. Thanks for joining us here for your latest world headlines. Returning at the top of the hour with all your updates and developments as well. For the meantime, hope to see you soon.
Well, interestingly enough, that was one of the most valuable things that I wanted to do, was question, shall we say, these Ukrainian prisoners, because I wanted to get inside their minds. I wanted to disentangle the strings that tied them up in knots, that enabled and animated their actions. What was their decision-making processes? What were their biases, their prejudices? What was their psychological profile? I wanted to study them in very deep, detailed ways. I am an American.
I know, I see.
Army officer. And I've come to Ukraine to try and understand and take the understanding back to Americans about what has been happening here. So I'm very glad that you would sit down and talk with me, and I'm very glad that you speak English, because my Russian isn't that good.
I'm a sergeant of Regiment Azov. I'm a commander of a crew, of a mortar crew, of a mortar battery of Regiment Azov. My name is Gennady, my surname is Harchenko, and my call sign was Terehere.
And what I found with the first prisoner, he was a very bright historian, economic-minded individual, was essentially no one in Ukraine really wanted to fight. They were pushed into it. They were grabbed off the street. They were captured by Zelensky. They were threatened, and so he didn't want to die, so he followed orders, but he'll have to pay the price for crimes that may have been done in those orders. So he was also a little naive, because he had said he had been told that the Zelensky government had said, you know, America supports us, America loves us, America, and I told him, no, that's wrong. The people of the United States of America have overthrown their Congress and got rid of the Democrats and the rhinos who were pushing for this war. The American people do not support Zelensky. The American people do not want to continue financing or providing weapons to Ukraine.
Татуировки сделан в Азове. Это шеврон батальона. Это Зликина тоже обозначает, что я воин. Татуировка на гунами.
And what do those say?
Смерть неизбежна.
I see. This is kept out of the Ukrainian mind. So what we've seen is a pseudo-pagan brainwashing of the Ukrainians that often is reinforced with tattoos of Teutonic, Viking, swastika, Bandera, hero ideologies. And then that is amplified by drug inducement.
Fire!
Fire, fire, fire!
Давай. Магазин. Все, пошли. No. Fire. Okay. Go, let's go.
Well, the Russian weapons, I think, are the best weapons on earth. I think they're wonderful weapons. My father always described the AK-47 as the best rifle ever made. They preferred those in Vietnam. I'm partial to that, too. I've had an AK-47 personally, and I think it's a wonderful weapon that endures everything. Very powerful and essentially cannot be exhausted, cannot be broken.
Let's go. Давай. Еще раз передерни. Контроль. Финиш. Молодец, окей.
Спасибо. I was a special operations soldier myself in the Army, and I see in their eyes the same discipline, professionalism, stoicism, and I think they're also loved by the people in the civilian cities of Russia. The mothers and fathers, the neighbors, the general family of the Russian people love their soldiers in uniform.
We'll get a picture of us.
На тебе, ты сломал автомат.
Yes. It's not quite as good without any bullets. Very good.
Понял. Ремонт.
Можно фотографию? Yes.
Сфоткай нам мой, пожалуйста. Сейчас я пацанов.
Спасибо.
Wait.
Давай. Тихо, стоим, не шевелимся.
Ой-ой. Ага. Вот так.
Okay. I gotcha. Okay.
You fly? Yeah, I'm flying.
It's amazingly quiet. There's no sound whatsoever. It's just a wind's whisper. You can't hear anything. And with an expert pilot like these guys, just being able to control it, it's amazing what they could do. And it's so small, it can't be shot out of the ground. No one can shoot at it. So I don't know any countermeasures other than maybe EMP or electronic or something like that. But that's a great technology. Well done.
Это дрон украинского производства. Все комплектующие берутся в Китае. Единственное, в чем мы видим пока небольшую проблему, это в системе связи Starlink. Starlink, да, вашего соплеменника Илона Маска. Он им поставляет это дело. В общем, трудность в чем? Она летает на нем. Трудно ее погасить, этот сигнал Старлинга. Ну, а так, в принципе, дрон больше ничем не представляет опасности. 82-е мины, камера ночного видения. Летает он в основном ночью, потому что он сильно шумный. Мотор, вот, слушайте, звук какой. Чтоб вас не ударило, отдадите. Слышите? А когда работает 4, его очень слышно. И днем его легко обнаружить. Летает ночью.
Is Elon Musk providing Starlink for these drones to be used against you?
Конечно. Получается так, да.
Jesus. So Elon Musk is providing Starlink, the technology, to use these drones against Russian soldiers and kill Russian soldiers. That's terrible.
Является поставщиком смерти на земли Донбасса.
And these drones are bombing also civilians, civilian targets, schools.
Конечно.
Yeah, that's news to me because Elon Musk has been telling everybody in America he's not providing Starlink to Ukrainian army. Elon Musk is providing Starlink capabilities to these drones. I'm thinking, well, he's told us in America, I'm not providing Starlink. That's a lie. And I get animated and off because They're desecrating my name and my country's name. You're lying to the American people, telling them Starlink's not being used to provide drones. These drones are killing people. And then I see the HIMARS hitting schools and kindergartens, and you're telling us, oh, HIMARS are going to be used only for military targets. That's a lie. From and why did you come to Russia?
I'm from South Korea.
South Korea?
In Seoul.
In Seoul?
Yes.
Okay. How have your Russian compatriots, soldiers in arms, how have they treated you and trained you?
Actually, I guess the problem is only language.
Yes.
Good thing that now I'm under training for drone. Now our team speak English because the curriculum and platforms also
in English.
Okay. So yes, I have no problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
What other nationalities and people have you seen here?
There's another base. He's from Germany.
Germany.
Yes. Also Italian. Colombian. Spanish. And South Korean.
And South Korean.
Also Japanese.
Japanese, yes. No Scotsman or Irishman?
I've never seen.
Oh, man, that's a shame. Well, that's good to see. So there's a lot of different people that are coming to help Russia. And how long do you think it's going to take before Russia completely defeats Ukraine?
I believe it will finish within next year.
All of these troops that I spent time with were common in their volunteering, and they're volunteering for the purposes of fighting fascism, because they'll realize this is an existential spiritual war between the side of light and law and naturalness and God and the side of darkness, demonism, and every form of perversion and corruption. And I think you'd see a lot of Americans come to the side of Russia as well. And settling in for the night. Spartan military. Reminds me of the old days in the American Army. All right. Blessed be the Lord my strength, which teacheth my hands to war and my fingers to fight. I shall give thee a tongue thine enemies cannot gainsay nor resist. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leadeth me besides the still waters. He setteth a table before me in the presence of my enemies. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy should follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
For Russia, for Donbass, for friendship between America and Russia. God bless the Russian people.
We need to counter the Russian state-controlled narrative.
Als Teil der Sanktionen gegen Russland gehen die westlichen Länder gegen russische Auslandssender vor.
Mais écoutez, monsieur, c'est pas à vous de décider de qui est journaliste ou pas dans ce pays. On est en France, quoi. C'est pas possible.
We will ban in the European Union
the Kremlin's media machine. The state-owned Russia Today and Sputnik.
RT, Sputnik, even our video agency, Roughly, all banned on YouTube.
Et merci à vous tous pour votre fidélité et votre soutien.
Hi, I'm Rick Sanchez, and I'm here to plead with you. Whatever you do, do not watch my new show. Seriously, why watch something that's so different? Why listen to opinions that you won't get anywhere else? Look, if it pleases you to have the State Department, the CIA, weapons makers, multi-billion-dollar corporations choose your facts for you, go ahead. Why change? And whatever you do, don't watch my show. Stay mainstream, because I'm probably going to make you uncomfortable. My show is called Direct Impact. But again, you probably don't want to watch it, because it might just change the way you think.
Мой позывной физрук – это тренировка с отработкой штурмовых действий. То есть я должен держать постоянно автомат на весу, смотреть прицел, мушку, целик. За счет такого упражнения вот отрабатывается навык, чтобы сразу быстро сориентироваться в пространстве. И также тренируются ноги, бицепс, спина тренируется и глазомер. Очень полезное упражнение. Сразу несколько, можно сказать, 5 в одном. Сейчас нет обстрелов, но они скоро начнутся обратно. На лестнице безопаснее всего снаряды кассетные. Даже если полетят, то можно оп, и закрыться. Когда вы слышите первый звук, я всегда так делаю. Баба! Я говорю, оп, готовься. Тра-та-та-та-та-та-та. Ну, ясно. Надо аккуратно.
Хорошо, что привели, зато всегда стыдно. Давайте оттуда рано.
А, может сало нарезать? Сало, давай сало. Ну-ка. С утра.
Сало нарежь, там сало.
Да. Чтобы день был веселее.
Very good to have cats and mice.
Так, вот это сало для того, чтобы было весело целый день.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Давай, бери хлеб, да.
Very good pork fat.
Ну, сюда в основном кассеты кидают. Это что поставляют вот американцы и европейцы. Ну и бомбят, и вот эти птички тоже сбрасывают все. Но город мы не отдадим, мы дальше пойдем.
it's always fun hiking in full battle gear.
Когда их уже поубирают? Когда вы их уже выгоните? Нечисть.
Amerikanski.
Не понимаешь? Do you speak English?
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Oh,
My
good.
name is Lida.
Lida, very nice to meet you. I'm Scott. You're a brave woman. True Russian.
Что делаете? Я тут что делаю? Живу.
Живете здесь?
Да. И не уезжала никуда.
Well, Soledar was right on the front lines, and you had mines going off that had been laid. You had constant barrages of artillery fire. You had the ruins of a town and burnt out vehicles. We also found a lady that was living in Soledar, one of the last inhabitants, who was refusing to leave her home. And the Ukrainians had tried to kill her and target her, but the Russians came to the rescue of Soledar, and she remained there. So she was a very interesting person that we had a conversation with, and she was standing strong, and I think is emblematic of what all Russian women are. They are fearless, they are standing to preserve their home, and they are not bowing to the fanaticism of fascists.
И попугаи в том году померзли, и рыбки померзли, и хомяки.
Kitty.
Ах, Алечка.
Oh, what a beautiful.
Хороший. Алечка у нас помогает с мышами, но мыши достают. Ой, я не знаю. Лежишь ночью, и по тебе мыши бегают. Так что передайте вашим англичанам, что мы хотим, чтобы был мир. Не надо никакой поставки этого оружия. Пускай прекратят это все, пускай будет мир, только мир. Как дружили, так и будем дружить. Ну что же это самое делается, а?
Well, I think the woman in Soledar who lives alone with her cats and her dogs and her memories and her home packed with cushions, with little mice that come through the broken windows, is both a story of sadness and a story of hope.
Кто-то летает где-то. Летает птичка.
Это выход, да?
Нет.
Приход?
Это наша артиллерия.
Ну выход.
Да.
Есть возможность, работайте по ней, птичка не наша.
Там работает.
It's always fun to be in full body armor gear, hustling, running. Takes me back to Benning. Hooah! But the devastation is horrendous. Look at this. I haven't seen anything like this since I Am Legend. So we've got Spetsnaz, Special Forces, covering our backs.
Move.
Have any grievance?
Come on.
Быстрее!
Здравствуйте.
How you doing?
Как ваша?
Там бинт грязный.
Where we are with the wonderful staff and nurses and doctors of this medical facility taking care of the wounded soldiers. And as an American veteran, I remember people we most love are the doctors and nurses because they're so invaluable.
Все, не шевелимся.
Это слепое осколочное ранение. Здесь 2 входа, там получается 2 осколка. Ранение получил сегодня, расскажи как.
Да, то есть мы перемещались с одной полки, лесополосы на другую, то есть перебежками 2 человека вперед ушли, то есть мы держали дистанцию и засекли нас. И, то есть, получается, по мне сработал АГС, это автоматический гранатомет с танками. То есть, взорвались 3 гранаты, то есть, одна где-то в 3 метрах, в 2, то есть, они идут заодно, и одна у меня взорвалась почти что под ногой. Но я сразу слег, наложил жгут, перемотался и начал отползать в окопу. Далее по мне сработал миномет. Еще 2 мины упали рядом, но я уже был в окопе.
Ну вот здесь получается 2 входа. Один здесь. Вот здесь осколочек. Ножку чуть-чуть согни. Не, вот так вот чуть-чуть.
Ну, так-то должна.
Так, все тогда. Вечером поедем в госпиталь.
Americans are not giving any more money or weapons to Zelensky. Americans are against Ukraine. We are on the side of Russia. We are in our own revolution. But no more Zelensky, no more Ukraine. Slava Russia. I can only apologize for the American weapon that wounded you. I'm sorry, but it's corrupt governments and weapons makers that make money on war. That's what this has been. What country am I on? What's happened to Western society? We were supposed to be the liberators of the oppressed. We're supposed to be the Captain America, right? Going around with a shield and helping people. And I discover when I've come here, we are a Frankenstein monster. We've created a Frankenstein